Let's begin by offering our respects to ISKCON founder Acharya and our preeminent Shiksha Guru, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
जय
Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swa Padantikam. Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saha Gana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vancha kalpa taruvyascha kripa sindhu vya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama
राम
Hare
राम हरे हरे
Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
ओम
ओम नमो
नमो
भगवते
भगवते
वासुदेवाय।
वासुदेवाय
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
ओम
ओम
नमो
नमो
भगवते
भगवते
वासुदेवाय
वासुदेवाय।
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo
Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate
ओम
Vasudevaya.
ओम नमो
नमो
भगवते
भगवते
वासुदेवाय
वासुदेवाय।
So we welcome all of you to our weekly online Krishna book classes. Thank you very much for joining. We have with us here Auntie Neeta, Shantaram Latkarji, Aja, Divina, Kamala Nandini Mataji, Karuna, Lavina Dadlani, Manju Nihalani, Meenakshi, N.C. Venkachari. Then we have Priyanka Jha. My parents are there. Then we have Rito Lalwani, Shailesh Latkar, Sheetal Latkar, Shivani, Shreya Kalaria, we have Shri Radha, Vivansh, Wendy Pares, and my husband is there. Okay. So, what did we see in the previous class?
Going back
We saw the divine vision of,
Vishnu Loka.
what's that?
Vishnu Loka.
So who saw that?
Akrura.
Akrura. Akrura saw divine vision. So when he went to have a bath in the river Yamuna, first, whom did he see in the waters?
Krishna.
He saw Krishna and
Krishna and
Balram.
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 and after that, what he did?
He thought that he had seen Krishna and Balram on the chariot, and they would be on the chariot. So he went back to his chariot to see them, and they were standing right there.
Yeah. So actually, he stationed the chariot under the shade of the tree, and Krishna and Balaram were on the chariot. And Akrura seek permission. He went to have a bath in the Yamuna, and then in the Yamuna also he sees Krishna Balaram. So he is like, "What's happening?" So he goes back to see on the chariot, and still Krishna and Balaram are on the chariot. Then what does he do?
He went back to Yamuna.
He comes back to the river Yamuna, and now what does he see?
There were many of them.
Krishna,
Balram,
yes,
and all other.
yes.
He
So he saw that Balaram turned into
Yamuna River.
Sheshnag.
Sheshnag, and Krishna turned into
Vishnu.
Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu, no? So Mahavishnu, he's seeing Krishna now in the four-handed form, no? And along with them, he sees many devatas, great sages, and so many
The
other
three
great
Kumaras.
personalities he sees in the water. So then after that, what does he do? After that, what does he do? In the last line, what did we read? Of the previous chapter. He begins to offer
Prayers.
prayers. Yes, he begins to offer prayers. So what exactly he says, what are his prayers, is what we are going to see. If
That's chapter 40.
today's chapter, chapter number 40 of the Krishna
40.
titled Prayers by Akrura.
Akrura.
Okay, let's read. Akrura offered his prayers as follows. My dear Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because you are the supreme cause of all causes, and the original inexhaustible personality Narayan. From your navel, a lotus flower grows, and from that lotus, Brahma, the creator of this universe, is born. Since Brahma is the cause of this universe, you are the cause of all causes, the elements of this cosmic manifestation. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, ego, and the total material energy, as well as nature, the marginal energy, the living entities, the mind, the senses, the sense objects, and the demigods who control the affairs of the cosmos are all produced from your body. So because Akrura is seeing now Krishna in the four-handed form, he is offering prayers to this particular form of Krishna. So which Vishnu is he describing here in this paragraph?
Mahavishnu.
Daksha Vishnu.
Who?
Mahavishnu.
Daksha.
Why do you say? So if you say Mahavishnu, why do you say Mahavishnu? Is Mahavishnu the same as Karanodakashayi Vishnu? Or they are two different
I
personalities?
remember the first Vishnu. I don't remember.
Vishnu.
It's Daksha Vishnu.
Karanodakashayi Vishnu is the same as Mahavishnu, right? So what does he do?
When he breathes in and out, the universes come out of his pores.
Yes.
Right?
So as from his breathing, he's creating universes. And then what happens from Mahavishnu or Karanodakashayi Vishnu, who expands? Garbhodakashayi Vishnu.
Garbhodakashayi Vishnu.
Garbhodakashayi
Garbhodakashayi.
Vishnu. What does Garbhodakashayi Vishnu do?
He from his navel, the a lotus flower comes out, and then Brahma is created, and then Brahma creates the universe.
Yes. So from Mahavishnu comes Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Garbhodakashayi Vishnu enters into each of those universes. So you can see here, Mahavishnu is breathing, and he's lying in the Karana ocean or the causal ocean, and he's creating universes by his breathing. So all these golden egg-shaped universes, these are all coming from the breathing of Mahavishnu. Then he expands as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Garbhodakashayi Vishnu enters into each universe. Okay. Now, from the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu comes the stem of the lotus flower, and from the lotus flower, Lord Brahma comes. Okay. So, how many Brahmas exist?
Many.
Many. As many universes there are, that many Brahmas are there, because
Brahmas
each
are there.
universe has its own Lord Brahma.
Right.
And the universes are of different sizes. Some are small, some are big. And how many heads Lord Brahma has, that is determined by the size of the universe. For example, the Brahma of our universe has how many heads?
4.
4.
4 heads. So our universe is very,
4.
very small. Is very, very small compared to the other universes, because there are Brahmas with 100 heads, 1,000 heads, million heads, even 100 million heads. So they are the other universes are much bigger than our universe. Our universe is very, very small. Okay. So here in this paragraph, which Vishnu is he seeing? Mahavishnu or Garbhodakashayi Vishnu? Coming back to our original question.
Garbhodakashayi.
Seeing both.
Yeah,
Garbhodakashayi
he is
Vishnu.
offering
He says
prayers
that
now to Krishna in
gem
the form
comes
of
out of her navel.
Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, because here he is seeing that from his navel the lotus is born, and from that lotus the creator of this universe is born. So here he is offering prayers to Krishna in the form of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And see here, the living entities, they are called as the marginal energy. Now, what do we mean by marginal energy? We know superior energy and we know inferior energy. There is also marginal energy. So anything that is completely spiritual is superior energy, belongs to Krishna's superior energy, in the sense that they can never come under the dominance of the inferior energy or the material energy. The material energy, which can be destroyed, which is not eternal, that is called as inferior energy. So that is the material nature, because material nature is created and it is destroyed. So it belongs to Krishna's inferior energy. Now the living entities actually belong to Krishna's superior energy. The jivas belong to Krishna's superior energy, but because the jiva can come under the dominance of material nature, no one can be conditioned by the material body, by the material modes of nature, sattva guna, rajoguna, tamoguna. Therefore, the living entities are called as the marginal energy, most specifically marginal energy, because the jiva can come under the dominance of material nature. So the jivas technically belong to Krishna's superior marginal energy. Okay. Shailesh, you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to understand, is this something that comes out as a prayer because Akrura knows all these things, or is this that from the vision that he gets enlightened?
No, Akrura knows. He knows already that Krishna is God. Because remember, the reason why he's serving Kamsa is because he wants to meet Krishna. So why does he want to meet Krishna? Because he knows that Krishna is God. So he knows, but when he sees this form, he begins to offer prayers. It's like we always know Lord exists everywhere, but when we go to the temple, we offer prayers more specifically, like that. Okay, let's continue. You are the super soul of everything, but no one knows your transcendental form. everyone within this material world is influenced by the modes of material nature. Even demigods like Lord Brahma, being covered by the influence of material nature, do not exactly know your transcendental existence beyond the cosmic manifestation of the three modes of material nature. Great sages and mystics worship you as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original cause of all living entities, all cosmic manifestation, and all demigods. They worship you as all inclusive. Some of the learned Brahmanas also worship you by observing Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. They offer different kinds of sacrifices in the names of different gods. And there are others also who are fond of worshipping transcendental knowledge. They are very peaceful, and after giving up all kinds of material activities, they engage in the sacrifice known as Jnana Yagya, the philosophical search for you. So now Krishna is offering, Akrura is offering prayers to Krishna in which form? He's seeing him as the
Personality of Godhead.
Yeah, but which personality of Godhead?
Paramatma, right?
Paramatma, yes. See, because he's saying you are the super soul of everything. So now he's offering prayers. And his realization is that Krishna, you are also the super soul. You are also the Paramatma. So he's saying that everyone within this material world is influenced by the modes of material nature. The modes of material nature are mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. Sattva guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna. Those who are not within the dominance of the three modes of material nature, they are in the transcendental mode of goodness, or they are in the Shuddha Sattva state. So there are living entities who are in the material world, not because of their past karma, not because they still have some impurity, but because they are here on a mission. Pure devotees can come. Krishna can send his messengers, his preachers, to spread the holy name, to spread the message of Krishna. So they are in the Shuddha Sattva stage, but the conditioned soul, they are in the any one of the three modes of material nature. So see here, even demigods like Lord Brahma, being covered by the influence of material nature, do not exactly know your transcendental existence beyond the cosmic manifestation of the three modes of material nature. So even great personalities like Lord Brahma, they cannot fully understand Krishna. This is the reason that sometimes they get bewildered, and then we have the Brahma Vimohana Leela, when Lord Brahma kidnapped the cows and the calves. So, or even Lord Indra, the king of heaven, how he thought that Krishna is an ordinary boy and he sends torrential rain, until then Krishna shows him who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even the Devatas, even great personalities, they cannot fully understand Krishna. Okay, what else do we have here? He is the original cause of all living entities. So Lord Brahma, he prays and he offers prayers to Lord Krishna in his Brahma Samhita, and he says that Krishna, you are Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes, in the sense that nothing can happen without Krishna's sanctioning. Even a leaf cannot turn without the sanction of Krishna. It is described that even for us to blink our eyes, Krishna has a Devata in charge. We cannot even blink our eyes on our own. For that also, there is a Devata who's in charge. So there is nothing that we can do on our own. Always, there's nothing do-it-yourself kit. Everything is under the sanction of Krishna. Then coming here to this section. Some of the learned Brahmanas also worship you by observing Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. They offer different kinds of sacrifices in the names of different gods. So this is what we call as Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda means the ritualistic ceremonies that are done by the Brahmanas so that the different material desires of the people are fulfilled. So as we discussed previously, the Vedas, the knowledge in the Vedas is in an ascending form. it starts with karma kanda rituals. No, if you want to have a son, then you do this ritual. If you want to have a good husband, then you pray to this particular devata. If you want to do well in your exams, then you pray to this particular devata. So like that, these are all karma kanda rituals. It's not dealing with pure devotional service. Okay, so the initial part of the Vedas, they take you through karma kanda rituals. But the conclusion of the Vedas is that you surrender to Krishna, surrender to Supreme, and what is pure devotional service. So it starts with karma kanda but ends with pure bhakti. The Vedas take you through that progression. So here, what is being described here is how the Brahmanas, they are engaging in the karma kanda sacrifice in the names of different demigods. Now, after that, now what is being described here? And there are others also who are fond of worshipping transcendental knowledge. So here he is talking about the Jnana yogis. The Jnana yogis are those people, they give up material sense gratification and they start to worship Krishna in the form of seeking out knowledge. So they engage in intensive study of the Shastras, they engage in intensive study of the scriptures, and like that, they try to achieve perfection through Jnana Yoga. So they are called as the Jnana Yogis. So they are very peaceful. Why they are very peaceful? Because at least they have given up their material activities and they are engaging in the sacrifice known as Jnana Yagya, the philosophical search for Krishna. So this is what is being described, Karma Kanda and then Jnana Yoga. Okay, do we have any hand raised? No. Let's continue. There are also devotees known as Bhagavatas who worship you as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After being properly initiated in the method of Pancharatra, they decorate their bodies with tilak and engage in worshipping your different forms of Vishnu Murti. There are others also known as Shaivites, followers of different acharyas who worship you in the form of Lord Shiva. So now here Akrura is talking about the devotees, the bhaktas, no, the bhakti yogis. What do these bhakti yogis do? They are initiated in the method of Pancharatra. Pancharatra Vidhi is a knowledge which deals with deity worship. How we should worship the deities. There is a whole science behind the whole method of worshipping the deities. So that is called as the Pancharatra. It was actually spoken by Narada Muni. Narada Pancharatrika, it is called, that particular Shastra. And ISKCON also has a deity worship manual based on that particular scripture. So what is Akrura talking about here is how the bhaktas, the devotees, they are worshipping the Lord following the Pancharatra Vidhi. So they decorate their bodies with tilak. So this tilak is very, very important. We decorate tilak. We decorate the body in 12 places. Every single day, if you apply the tilak in the 12 parts of your body with the particular mantra, there is a particular mantra which is said when you apply tilak on the 12 different parts of your body, then you are protected from outside material contamination. Applying this tilak every day after your bath is very, very crucial. It helps you. It helps you protect yourself, from contamination, as I said. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, he said that a body without tilak is a dead body. A body without tilak is a dead body. Why? Because when we apply tilak on our body, we are recognizing that this body is the house, is the temple of the Lord. Because the Lord is residing in the core of our hearts as the Paramatma. So where the Lord resides, that place is a temple. So because the Lord is residing in our bodies, then we recognize this body also as a temple and we make these particular markings. So for example, when we put the tilak on the forehead, we say Om Keshavaya Namaha. And then there are 12 other parts. I will share the details in the group later. Every day, if you can apply tilak on your body, you will be able to you will feel the difference. You will see how it is so auspicious and it also protects you. Now, for some reason, if you're not able to apply visible tilak, say somebody is going for a job or you're in a situation where you cannot apply the visible tilak, at least you can chant the mantra and apply the tilak with water. So the tilak is invisible, but it is there. The protection is there with the particular mantras. So it's very, very important to apply the tilak on the 12 parts of your body every day after your bath. Okay. And engage in worshipping your different forms of Vishnu Murti. So Vishnu Tattvas are, as we already discussed, Narayan, Krishna, Lord Ram, Narsimadev, like that. These are all the Vishnu Tattvas, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. These are all the Vishnu, or Gauranitai. These are all Vishnu Tattvas. Then there are others who are Shaivites, followers of different acharyas who worship you in the form of Lord Shiva. So as we discussed, there are four bona fide sampradayas, and one sampradaya is the Rudra Sampradaya, which is coming from Lord Shiva. So the followers of Lord Shiva, they are called as Shaivites, Akruras say. Okay, Wendy, you have your hand raised.
Hare Krishna Mataji, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you speak a little louder, please?
Yes, I use the audífono. Quiero preguntarle, cuando usted habla de las tilacas deberían aplicarse en el cuerpo previo una iniciación o se puede hacer uno cuando ya decide entregar su vida a Krishna?
No es necesario esperar la iniciación. Cualquiera puede hacer. Se toma la ducha y se aplica los 12 tilak madre. No hay que esperar la iniciación.
Okay, thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So her question was, do we have to wait to get initiated to apply the 12 tilak mantra? So the answer is no, you don't have to wait to be initiated. You can use the mantras and you can apply the tilak on your body. Okay. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that worship of demigods is also indirectly worship of the Supreme Lord. But such worship is not orthodox because the worshipable Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan. Demigods such as Brahma and Shiva are incarnations of the material qualities, which are also emanations from the body of Narayan. Actually, there was no one existing before the creation except Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The worship of a demigod is not on the same level as worship of Narayan. So very, very important points here Akrura is making. Worship of the demigods is also indirectly worship of the Supreme Lord. First of all, why? Let's deal with the first sentence here. Why is worship of demigods an indirect worship of Krishna?
Because the demigods are the different parts of the bodies of Virat Krishna, and also because whatever yagna you do, it goes to God, it goes to Krishna through them.
Yes, very nice. Very good. What else?
Nothing happens without the sanction of Krishna.
Whether we worship a devata and we get a result, or we worship Krishna and get a result, ultimately it is sanctioned by Krishna only. And when we worship, as Sri Radha was saying, when we worship any devata also, when we do the yagya, there will be some mantras which the Brahman will chant for invoking Lord Vishnu. So that worship also is actually going to Krishna only indirectly. Okay, very nice. Now one may say, if anyway, whoever I worship, the worship is going to Krishna, then why should I not worship the devatas? Why is it considered less intelligent? Because Krishna calls the demigod worshippers as Alpa Medasa. Alpa Medasa means less intelligent. So why are the demigod worshippers considered less intelligent if anyway the worship is going to Krishna?
Because you are
Go ahead, Mother.
God worship is for some result, right? And Bhagavan worship is just you are pure, you're not asking anything, you're just doing seva. Is that
Okay,
the
very
reason?
nice. So pure devotees, when they worship Krishna, they worship only out of love. They don't want anything in return. Demigod worshippers usually, as I said in the beginning of the Vedas, is described. Now, if you want this particular material desire to be fulfilled, then you worship this particular devata. So that's called karma kanda rituals. So it is ritualistic. It is not spiritual. Why? Because there is no spirit behind the ritual. It's only a ritual. That's called karma kanda. There is no word called karma kanda yoga. Yoga means to unite with the Supreme. There is some element of bhakti should be there. For example, in Jnana Yoga, the word yoga is there because there is an element of bhakti. May not necessarily be 100% pure, but there is an element of bhakti. So therefore, Jnana Yoga. And then there is Dhyana Yoga. where one tries to raise the consciousness from the lower chakras to the higher chakras. But there is an element of bhakti, so it is called as dhyana yoga. But there is no word called karma kanda yoga because there is no connection with the supreme. The whole idea of performing or engaging in karma kanda rituals is I want this, therefore I worship this particular devata. So there is no element of bhakti. Okay. What else? What else is the difference between demigod worship and worshipping Krishna? Let's say I am not a pure devotee and I have some material desires, but I decide to worship Krishna for my material desire also instead of worshipping a devata.
If you
So is there a
worship Krishna,
difference?
yes. If
He'll
you
eventually
worship,
take you to the transcendental plane.
And also will take you to the abode of the demigods, because if you want to worship materially, Krishna says you worship me materially. Na? You ask me anything material, I'll give you. You do my devotional service. Why you have to go to demigods? Because demigods are my part and parcels, and you are also my part and parcel, so you worship me. So the difference is between demigods and Krishna worship is that if you worship Krishna, you will go to his abode and you'll also become transcendental and you'll be purified. And if you worship the demigods, then your heart will not be purified. You'll go to their abode and then you'll have to come back to this material world. And your mind and your heart has to be purified now, so that Krishna can do that.
Right. So the worshipper of the demigods, he goes to the abode of the demigods, right? The worship reaches Krishna, but the worshipper does not reach Krishna. When we worship the devatas, the worship reaches Krishna because ultimately Krishna has to sanction, right? So the worship reaches Krishna, but the worshipper does not necessarily reach Krishna. So we go to that planet where that devata is whom we are attracted to. Okay, what's the problem? I can go to the abode of the devata that I like. What's the problem?
It is
We're
temporary.
still stuck in the
It is
material
temporary.
cycle.
Yes, exactly. It is temporary because the abode of the devatas is temporary. It is destroyed at the time of destruction. But Krishna's abode is
Permanent.
Transcendental, permanent,
is
and blissful.
transcendental. It is eternal. It is never destroyed. So when what does it mean that the abode of the devatas is destroyed? Is what does it mean? It means I am still in the material world. I am still in the material cycle. I have not yet gained freedom from the cycle of birth and death. See, now let's take some examples. Now, Hiranyakashipu, he did so much of tapasya to please Lord Brahma. Yes. And the tapasya he did was so intense, no, that his body was completely eaten by ants, and hardly any life was left in his body. No, he was breathing, but he had become a bag of bones only. So much intense tapasya he did. He got such great boons also from Lord Brahma that he will not be killed neither during the day nor during the night. He will not be killed within the house nor outside the house. He will be killed neither by animal nor a human being nor by any devatas. So he asked for so many benedictions in the sense that he thought that now I'm eternal, because such a condition cannot be there for a death. No, he was thinking like that. But how long did those boons last? How long did those boons
It
last?
was temporary.
Ultimately, he was defeated by a 5-year-old child. A 5-year-old child, by the power and potency of the devotion of a 5-year-old child. It's described that Hiranyakashipu, he was such a terrible demon that even the devatas would start to shiver by his just raising his eyebrow. That was the power of Hiranyakashipu. But ultimately, what happened? Everything was destroyed. So the boons that you get from a devata also are temporary. Even the boons you get from devatas are temporary. It is not eternal. Another difference between Krishna giving you your material desire, sanctioning your material desire, as compared to a devata sanctioning your material desire, is Krishna will first purify the heart before he gives you that desire. In the case of, who knows?
Dhruv Maharaj.
Dhruv Maharaj, famous example, no? Because Dhruv Maharaj, he had a material desire. What was that? I want a kingdom greater than that of Lord Brahma also. That was his desire. So it's a material desire. But he prayed to Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu gave him his desire, but he first purified his heart. By the time he got his desire, what was Dhruva praying? He said, "Oh, now I realize that I was praying for broken pieces of glass," he said. So his desire to get a kingdom, to get a planet, to get an abode, even greater than that of Lord Brahma, because Brahma's planet is the highest planet in the material universe, remember. So to get that, now he realizes that also is a desire that is compared to broken pieces of glass. So Krishna, when he gives you your material desires, he will first purify the heart and then he will give it to you. So this is another difference. So even if one has material desires, intelligence is to pray to Vishnu Tattva. Another example is Ravan. Ravan also got so many boons from Lord Shiva. But ultimately, how long did those boons last? Eventually, he was killed by Lord Ram. No? So the boons of the Devatas are temporary because the Devatas themselves are temporary. They are not permanent. Yeah, Shreya, you have your hand raised.
So when we say that the abode of demigods are temporary, but I mean Ganeshji or Hanumanji or whoever it is, they reside in Vaikuntha, right? If not Goloka, at least.
No,
So
Devatas are not residing in Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is the 400 Narayan forms.
then where are the demigods?
In Swargaloka is the abode of the Devatas and Indra is the king of Swargaloka. Most
So
of the
then-
Devatas are residing in Swargaloka. That's the abode of the Devatas.
So then they have Indra is opposed and Indra changes.
Yes, even the Devatas also is opposed.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Then Hanumanji is also a demigod?
Hanuman is an eternal servant of Lord Ram. Wherever
Hmm.
Ram resides, then Hanuman is there. He's an eternal servant of Lord Ram. When Lord Ram descends, then Hanuman also descends to serve him.
So he is not a demigod, right?
He's not a demigod. He's an eternal servant of Lord
The
Ram.
demigods include the wind god or the sun god or
Yes, yes, yes.
okay.
See here, there are 10 offenses to the chanting of the holy name. And the second offense is to consider the names of the demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. So actually it's one of the 10 offenses to consider the names of Devatas like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to Lord Vishnu. See here in the previous line. The worship of a demigod is not on the same level as worship of Narayan. And also, this is prayers by Akrura. And also, one of the 10 offenses is that to consider the names of the demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. So, we should be careful that when we are chanting the holy name, we should not commit any offenses. If we are chanting and we feel that I'm not able to feel any ecstasy, I'm not able to develop the taste for chanting, then we have to consider that perhaps we are making some mistake, some offense we are committing knowingly or unknowingly during our chanting, and that's the reason why one is not able to develop the taste for chanting. Because this is an experiment, or rather we have had many acharyas, many devotees in the past who have chanted the holy name and they have attained success. So it's not that it's an experiment that will not work. The experiment will work if you do it properly, if you do it correctly. It is a tried and tested experiment. But if it's not working for us, then it means that there is some mistake that I'm making. So immediately we should go through again what is carefully go through these 10 offenses and see. Perhaps I'm committing some offense unknowingly. Therefore, the holy name is not having its effect the way it should have. And what is the very first offense against the chanting of the holy name? To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. So when we deal with Krishna and when we deal with the devotees of Krishna, we should be very, 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 very careful. Krishna may forgive us if we commit an offense to him. But if he commit an offense to his devotee, then that makes Krishna very, very angry. So that's the reason why the only remedy for Vaishnava aparad is to go and seek forgiveness from the Vaishnava whom we have offended. So these 10 offenses are very, very important. Shailesh, you have your hand raised.
Can you just explain point number 9 and 10?
Let's see. Point number 9, to instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. See, the point is, if you tell a person who has no faith about the glories of the holy name, what will that person do? He will only start to criticize you more. He will start to criticize the holy name more. He will start to criticize the Lord more, and he will incur more and more offenses for himself. So if you are his well-wisher and you know that he has no faith, then you do not instruct him on the glories of the holy name. You give him maybe you can use other techniques till he develops some faith. And as soon as there is some faith, then you can instruct him about the glories of the holy name. For example, let's say you have a friend who is a hardcore atheist, no? And he thinks that all this is nonsense to chant the holy name. God does not exist. All right. But what you can do, if he comes to your house, you can offer him very nice, opulent prasad. Anybody, even a hardcore atheist, will be able to appreciate good food, right? So you give him some prasad. That prasad will lead to his purification. And you can chant the holy name. You are doing it for yourself. This is what he is going to think. Oh, this guy is crazy. He is chanting, but I don't believe in all this. But because he is hearing you chant, he is getting the sound vibration is entering his ears, is going into his consciousness. So he will be benefited. So like that, you use other techniques to first inculcate or to develop some faith in the person. And then you tell him about the glories of the holy name. Because otherwise, he will end up committing more and more offenses, which is not good for him and is not good for you also. Then number 10, to not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So one may think that, okay, this holy name is there, this Hare Krishna mantra is there, but it is free for all. See, when something is free, sometimes we think that it is cheap. So we may not have the faith that actually this Maha Mantra works. And we may think that, no, I have this particular material attachment. So therefore, I'm going to pursue, work hard like an ass to pursue this particular material attachment because I want that desire of mine to be fulfilled. Now, say we all have this tendency to enjoy. Why do we like to enjoy? Is because we have enjoyed unlimitedly when we were in the spiritual world. Yes, there is unlimited facility to enjoy in the spiritual world. So therefore, we have the tendency to enjoy. But intelligence is, why is it that I want to enjoy? Why is it that I do not want to die? Why is it that I do not want to grow old? Why I do not like to get any disease? Because when I was in spiritual world, there was no disease, there was no death, no, there was no anxiety. There was only enjoyment and the bliss was unlimited, ever increasing. So one should have faith that this chanting of the holy name will give me enjoyment, will give me eternality, will give me freedom from disease, will give me freedom from death, like that. So to not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter, that is also an offense to the chanting of the holy name. Okay. All right, Aja.
Mataji, can you explain one more time that number 9?
To instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. So what I said was, if a person does not have any faith, then you do other things, like you can give him prasad, or you can make him hear the holy name somehow or the other, let the sound vibration go into this and use other techniques till he develops some faith. And once he has some faith, then you can instruct him on the glories of the holy name so that he doesn't commit offenses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
Shreya?
So here Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, right? So even Lord Shiva is a demigod and he gets, because he's not opposed, right? Like he doesn't, I mean, Lord Brahma changes, but not Lord Shiva, right?
See, as I said again, there are different Rudras. There is not only one Lord Shiva. There is one Shiva, Sadashiva, who's in Vaikuntha. Now that Sadashiva is eternal. He is not a demigod. But there is also one Shiva who is in charge of the mode of ignorance. He is temporary. He is not eternal. So there are different Shivas. Okay. So the Shiva who is in charge of the mode of ignorance, he is temporary.
Hmm.
And usually Lord Shiva who is worshipped here is that Shiva who is in charge of the mode of ignorance here in the material world. There is very, very little or no information available about Sadashiva who is in the Vaikuntha planets. How is he? What does he look like? We don't have that information because most of the Vedas have been lost over time. We don't have all the Vedas available with us anymore now. So
So-
right now we don't have access to the information of Sadashiva who's in the Vaikuntha planet, but we know that yes, there is a Sadashiva in the Vaikuntha planets who is eternal.
So
That
then
is
the
the
one
information we have.
worship is who? Which Shiva?
What?
One whom we worship.
The one who is generally worshipped here is the Shiva who is in charge of the mode of ignorance in the material world.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Shantaramji.
See this point 10. Not to have any material.
There is an echo. I cannot understand. Shailesh, you need to help, please.
The last point, and to maintain material attachments.
Yes.
So is there any human being here without material attachments? Everybody has some or the other material attachment. If that is such kind of offense, only some saints like Jnaneshwar or Tukaram or some such people, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, such exceptions. Otherwise, every human being has some material attachment. So if it is to be read literally, to not have complete faith, people will have faith in chanting the holy names. But further, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions. So material attachments will always be there.
Okay. See, it's true, 99.99% of the population, they have some material attachments, and very less percentage of people are at the level of pure devotional service, where they have zero material attachments. Anya abhilashita shunyam. No? Anya abhilashita shunya means I have no other desire than to please Krishna. So what you are saying is correct, but that does not mean that we cannot come to that level. We take to the process. See, this is compared to a person who has jaundice. Prabhupada gives this example. When a person is infected with jaundice, then what happens? He does not, when he has sugar, that sugar will taste very bitter to him because he's in a disease condition, right? But that doesn't mean he stops taking sugar candy, because the only cure for jaundice is to take the sugar candy. At least previously, the only cure for jaundice was sugar candy. But because he is diseased, it would be very bitter. But still he has to take it because it is his medicine. So he takes the medicine, he takes the medicine, he takes the medicine until one day he will be cured of his disease. And now the same sugar candy will taste very, very sweet to him. So we are all materially diseased. So therefore we have material attachments. But then we have to take the medicine of the chanting of the holy name. As we take the medicine of the chanting of the holy name, our material attachments will be reduced until we come to the level of pure devotional service. So what is important is we take the medicine, we continue chanting. So as far as possible, it's not possible. See, when we start chanting, we already have so many attachments. It's true. But therefore, we are taking the medicine, and every now and then we go through these offenses, and we try as far as possible, we try our best to fulfill them to our best extent. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita does not say that you have to do the best. right? He wants us to try to do the best. Krishna sees our sincerity. So we try our best. We go through these 10 offenses over and over again, and we try to reduce our offenses, try to reduce our anarthas as much as possible. Whatever is remaining, Krishna will do the rest. If we are sincere, Krishna will take over. Just as say Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I carry what you lack and preserve what you have. If you are rendering devotional service to me, Krishna says, no, I carry what you lack and preserve what you have. So when Krishna says, I carry what you lack, it means he recognizes that we are lacking so many things. So yes, we may have so many material attachments, but because we are chanting, if you see, when you do sadhana, over and over and over, day after day after day, for years, decades, then you will see the difference. Your material attachments will be far less compared to what it was when you started chanting. So we try our best. And yes, the day will definitely come when we will be at the stage of Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. And even if we are not able to come to that stage, no, because Krishna, he says that I carry what you lack. So he will put in whatever is missing, he will put in for us. Another way of understanding this is we have the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So even if we are not qualified, because we have a bona fide spiritual master who is qualified, he can take us into the spiritual world through the back door, because Krishna always fulfills the desire of his pure devotees. So the spiritual master, he will take us in, although we may lack the merits, but he can take us in through the mercy quota. There are two quotas, no, in any field. You can get in a job or a education or a college through the mercy quota or the merit quota. So merits we may lack, but then we can get in through the mercy of the spiritual master. So yes, we may have material attachments, but we have to at least try our best. Our sincerity is very, very important. We have to work towards it. Not that, okay, I have material attachments, but I will continue to have material attachments. I don't care. No, we have to try. Oh, my dear Lord Krishna, I have so many material attachments. Please help me. Please help me. We seek out, we cry out to the Lord. Okay, so at least we have to sincerely try. That much we have to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Sri Radha.
So here it says, devotees, you cannot blaspheme them who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. But we see that there are a lot of devotees in the centers or outside at home and they blaspheme each other. What is all that? Is that like a offense, or is that like in the due course of time?
See,
they
when we are saying that other devotees are blaspheming, we are also blaspheming them, is it not?
Yeah, we all are,
Yeah,
because
so we don't have to discuss what somebody else does in their spiritual life. All the rules and regulations of Shastra are to be meant to apply to us. What am I doing? I take this rule. I should not blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. I should not do that. I don't have to take a lens and see, is he blaspheming the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name? No. I don't have to take this magnifying glass and see who is following this or not. No, this I have to say how much I am able to follow. What somebody else does is between him, his guru, and Krishna. Right? I don't have to interfere there. Unless I'm trying to help someone. If I'm somebody's mentor, I'm mentoring somebody in their spiritual life, then I have a right to correct that person so that that person can benefit in that person's spiritual life. But otherwise, all the rules and regulations are meant for me to apply in my life, not to see what somebody else is doing about it. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful.
But if you're in the association of those whose souls that are blaspheming other devotees and you are confused and you don't understand and all your intelligence is lost, what to do?
If you feel that you are associated with someone who is blaspheming, then you don't associate with the person. You look for devotees who are not engaging in such things. That's all. You don't develop an intimate relationship with them. You can be socially polite. Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Mataji, Hari Bol. You stop at that. And you can look for more intimate association elsewhere, if that's what you think it is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Shailesh?
At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that just surrender.
Yes.
So is that option available to us mere mortals, or is it just for Arjuna?
It is for everyone. Actually, Arjuna there on the battlefield is representing each one of us over there. All the questions that Arjuna asks and all the answers that he gets from Krishna is actually our own questions. And Krishna's instructions are for all the living entities. Because see, Arjuna is there in the middle of the battlefield in the state of confusion. We are all also fighting our own battles in life, is it not? We also have our confusions. Each one of us, every jiva is battling so many things in their life. So how to deal with those tricky situation? If you apply the rules of Krishna's Bhagavad Gita teachings are even applied in big corporate offices actually. Even non-devotee corporate offices, they apply the instructions of Krishna and it works. So it is a universal law for all the living entities.
So if one surrenders and the surrender is accepted, everything else is moot.
Everything else is?
Moot. It's a moot
Moot?
point. Everything else is means what you need to do is surrender.
Yeah, ultimately it all boils down to that Sharanagati. Sharanagati, complete surrender. That's what matters. But how are we going to surrender to Krishna? He is not my next door neighbor, right? So we surrender to Krishna by surrendering to his bona fide representative. We surrender to Krishna by surrendering to the spiritual master.
Actually, that's the dangerous point to say, because he is a next door neighbor. So he is the Paramatma.
Yeah, he is there in the Paramatma, but right now, do we have the ability, do we have the qualification to see the Paramatma? Do we have that? Are we at that level? Do we have that capacity, and do we have that qualification? So to qualify ourselves to realize Krishna as a Paramatma, we need a guru. We need to surrender to the guru. When we surrender to guru, then by surrendering to guru, we surrender to Krishna. Yeah, Sri Radha?
In some lecture I heard long ago that Prabhupada said, you surrender to my disciples and you'll all be safe and all that. But if we surrender to Prabhupada's disciple and they criticize and they blaspheme other devotees.
Now
then-
again, you're criticizing. Now, why are you talking about others, Sri Radha? Try to understand what somebody else does is not for us. Now you have a spiritual master. You have surrendered to a spiritual master. You follow his instructions and you will go back home, back to God. What
Okay.
somebody else does is not for us to comment upon. That is again a criticism. That is again blasphemy. You have to be very careful. And here you're dealing with Prabhupada disciples.
Yeah.
Yeah, devotees. It's not necessary. This conversation is not necessary.
Okay. I think I lost all my intelligence maybe.
Okay. Coming back to Krishna book. Akrura said, although the minds of those who are devotees of the demigods are fixed on a particular demigod, because you are the super soul of all living entities, including the demigods, worship of the demigods indirectly goes to you. Sometimes sometimes after flowing down from the mountains during the rainy season, small rivers fail to reach the sea. Some reach the sea and some do not. Similarly, the worshippers of the demigod may or may not reach you. There is no guarantee. Their success depends on the strength of their worship. So here Akrura is giving this analogy of how the rivers from the mountains, some of them reach the sea, some of them do not reach the sea. So in the same way, although the worship of the demigods is going to Krishna, the worshipper may or may not reach Krishna, depending on the strength of their worship. According to Vedic principles, according to the Vedic principles, when a worshipper worships a particular demigod, he also conducts some rituals for Narayan, Yagneshwar, for it is not mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. The demigods cannot fulfill the desires of their worshippers without the sanction of Narayan or Krishna. I'll read that again. The demigods cannot fulfill the desires of their worshippers without the sanction of Narayan or Krishna. The exact words used in the Bhagavad Gita are Mayaiva Vihitan Hitan, which means that the demigods can award some benediction after being authorized by the Supreme Lord. When a demigod worshipper comes to his senses, he can reason as follows. The demigods can offer benedictions only after being empowered by the Supreme Lord. So why not worship the Supreme Lord directly? Such a worshipper of the demigods may come to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but others who take the demigods as all in all cannot reach the ultimate goal. So here, see, Draupadi, this is the very unfortunate incident of when they tried to disrobe Draupadi in the Kuru assembly. No, so Draupadi, she has 5 mighty husbands who are undefeatable in the world. Okay. I mean, Arjuna has even gone to the higher planetary systems. He has got divine weapons and all that. And Bhim has the strength of thousands of elephants. So who can defeat the 5 Pandavas? And she herself belongs to a Kshatriya king, no? And her birth also, Draupadi did not have an ordinary birth. She has come from the Yagya. And she is there surrounded by great personalities, great devotees, Mahajans like Bhishma Dev is there. Dronacharya, the guru of all these Kauravas, is also there in that assembly. The king, Dhritarashtra, is also there. So, and she's in her very home, right? She's in her house. But still, a personality like her had to go through this experience, this anxiety. So, Draupadi, she surrendered to Krishna. None of these other people could help her. Even a pure devotee, a Mahajan like Bhishma Dev, could not help her in that situation. Her 5 husbands could not help her in that situation. The king could not help her in that situation. Nobody could help her, only for Krishna. So because she surrendered to Krishna, she was able to come out of this situation actually as a very, very glorious person. This was an incident. This was the lowest point in her life, but she came out as the most honorable person at the end of this episode. Why she came out the most honorable person? It is because of her only, her husbands got back the kingdom. They had become slaves. They had lost their kingdom, wealth, everything. But because Draupadi asked for the boons that Dhritarashtra was willing to give her. Because Dhritarashtra was afraid that if she curses, we will be all destroyed. So Dhritarashtra said he's trying to make up, no? He tried to do some patchwork. And he said, okay, you ask for some boons in order to calm down Draupadi. So then Draupadi asked for the boons. And she said, I want everything to be returned to my husband. So the husbands got back their lost glory, their kingdom, their wealth only because of Draupadi. And throughout this incident, Draupadi never left the side of Dharma. Even though she was brought in that condition, she was dressed in a single cloth, no, when she was brought by Dushasana in the assembly, with her hair open and she was dragged by her hair. She was brought in that condition, but still she offered obeisances, she offered respects to her elders in that assembly. And even then, even when she asked for the boons, and Dhritarashtra said, okay, you have asked for your 2 boons, ask for more, ask for more. That time Draupadi said, no, Shastra says that not more than 2 boons at a time should be asked for. That is the Vedic system. So she said, no, because that's what the Shastra says, that's the Vedic system. I will not ask for more than 2 boons. She could have asked if she wanted to, the situation was there, but she always stuck to Dharma, no? And initially also when she asked for the lost glory out of the 5 husbands, she could have asked that first she asked that Yudhishthira should be freed. She could have asked for Arjuna because it was Arjuna who won her Swayamvar also. But she asked for Yudhishthira to be freed first. Why? Because he is the eldest brother. So that also she did what is correct according to Dharma, because he is the eldest brother, no? But she could have asked for Arjuna also because it was not Arjuna who staked her. She asked for Yudhishthira, that very person who actually staked her in the gambling match. So you see, Draupadi, she came out as the most honorable person in the lowest point of her life. And she also called out to Krishna. So the point here is nothing can help you except for surrendering to Krishna. That's the point. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so these are the verses in the Bhagavad Gita from chapter 7 where Krishna talks about the demigod worship. And Krishna says here, 22, I'll read 22 directly. Rest you can read when I share the slides. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. So Krishna is saying that whatever benefit you get from a devata actually is bestowed by me. Krishna is the one who's sanctioning it. Then Krishna says, men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. Exactly what we were previously discussing. Okay. Akrura continued to pray, my dear Lord, the whole world is filled with the three material modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. Everyone within this material world is covered by these modes, from Lord Brahma down to the non-moving plants and trees. My dear Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because you are beyond the influence of the three modes. Except for you, everyone is being carried away by the waves of these three modes. My dear Lord, fire is your mouth, the earth is your feet, the sun is your eye, the sky is your navel, and the directions are your ears. Space is your head. The demigods are your arms, the oceans and seas are your abdomen, and the winds and air are your strength and vitality. All the plants and herbs are the hairs on your body, the clouds are the hair on your head, the mountains are your bones and nails, the days and nights are the blinking of your eyelids. Prajapati, the progenitor, is your genitals, and the rains are your semen. So here basically Akrura is describing the universal form or the Virat Roop, just to show that nothing can exist independently of Krishna in the whole of creation. My dear Lord, all living entities, including different grades of demigods and the different grades of overlords, kings, and other living entities, are resting in you as parts and parcels of the big unit. One cannot know you by experimental knowledge. One can simply understand your transcendental existence to be like the great ocean in which different grades of living entities are included, or like the Udumbara fruit out of which small mosquitoes come. My dear Lord, whatever eternal forms and incarnations you accept when you appear in this world are meant for relieving the living entities of their ignorance, illusion, and lamentation. All people, therefore, can appreciate the incarnations and pastimes of your Lordship and eternally glorify your activities. No one can estimate how many forms and incarnations you have, nor can anyone estimate the number of universes that are existing within you. So what is this Udumbara fruit? How do we know this better? By which name? Do you know Anjeer, figs? So
Yes.
Udumbara fruit is the fig. And actually the figs are inverted flowers. And it is described how there is a certain category of an insect. They go inside this fruit, inside the fig, through a small opening at the bottom of the fruit. No, and as they are entering, they go inside for pollination, because remember, for pollination you need the flowers, and these figs are actually inverted flowers. So because the flowers are inverted, so therefore for pollination, this particular insect, it goes inside, and in the process of going inside, it loses its wings. So some of the insects, they are trapped inside, and then they are digested by the enzymes of the fruit. So therefore, this description of the insects coming from the Udumbara fruit. Just a little technical, but just to understand this example. Okay. Let me therefore offer. Okay, Sri Radha, you have your hand raised?
I'm sorry, it got clicked by on its own. I
Okay.
didn't.
Okay. Let me therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto the fish incarnation who appeared in the ocean of devastation, although your lordship is the cause of all causes. So who is this fish incarnation?
Matsya Avatar.
Matsya, yes, Matsya. Then let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Hayagriva incarnation who killed the two demons, Madhu and Kaitabha. So Hayagriva incarnation is a incarnation who has the head of a horse. And these two demons, they had stolen the Vedas. Okay, so therefore Hayagriva, he killed these two demons. Okay, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you who appeared as a gigantic horse that held up the great mountain Mandara, and who appeared as the boar that rescued the earth planet which had fallen into the water of the Garbhodaka. So who's this gigantic horse incarnation of the Lord? We know him by the name Which avatar is this?
I don't remember the name, but
Boar.
Samudra Manthan happened, right?
Gigantic
horse.
tortoise. It starts with a K.
Kurma
Kurma
avatar.
Avatar.
Kurma avatar, yes, Kurma avatar, very nice. And the boar incarnation?
Varaha avatar.
Varaha, yes, Varaha. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto your lordship, who appeared as Narsimadev to deliver all kinds of devotees from the fearful condition of the atheistic atrocities. So Narsimadev killed who?
Hiranyakashipu.
Hiranyakashipu.
Hiranyakashipu, yes. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appeared as Vamanadev and covered the three worlds simply by extending your lotus feet. So Vamanadev came and begged for charity from which personality?
Bali Maharaj.
Bali
Bali
Maharaj.
Bali
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Yes. Let me offer my
Bali
respectful
Maharaj will be the
obeisances
next
unto you, who
hero.
appeared as the Lord of the Brigus in order to kill all the infidel administrators of the world. Which personality is this?
Parashurama.
Parashuram, very nice. And let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appeared as Lord Ram to kill demons like Ravan. You are worshipped by all devotees as the chief of the Raghu dynasty, Lord Ramachandra. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appear as Lord Vasudev, Lord Sankarshan, Lord Pradyumna, and Lord Aniruddha. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appear as Lord Buddha to deliver the atheistic and demoniac. And let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appear as Kalki to chastise the so-called royal order degraded to the abominable condition of the Malechas, who are below the jurisdiction of Vedic regulative principles. So here, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, they are the four quadruple expansions. They are the first quadruple expansion or the Chatuvyuha expansions of the Lord. So from Krishna comes Balaram, and then from Balaram come the four quadruple expansion, or the first Chatuvyuha expansions. Then from the first Chatuvyuha expansion comes Narayan. From Narayan comes the second Chatuvyuha expansion, or the second Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Okay. Then coming to Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha also is recognized as a bona fide incarnation of Krishna, but we do not follow the instructions of Lord Buddha. Why?
I also have a question related to this, Mataji. Buddha, in Buddha's teaching, Buddha never talk about God. He says there are no gods, right? It's all illusion.
Yes, right. Therefore, we do not follow the instructions of Lord Buddha. But Buddha is recognized as a bona fide incarnation of Krishna. So why? We have to understand. The reason is when Lord Buddha appeared, there was widespread killing of animals going on in the name of the Shastras by Brahmanas who did not have proper knowledge. See, the Vedas state that one can engage in meat eating once a month. But again, this is not for Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, any kind of meat eating is completely prohibited. Okay, so before we get any ideas, remember in Kali Yuga, any kind of meat eating at any point of time is completely prohibited. But in the previous Yugas, it was allowed once a month by the qualified Brahmanas. Why? Because they would perform yagyas. In that yagya, they would kill animals, cows or other animals, and they would offer it in the yagya. But then they would chant mantras and they would bring the animal back to life. Now, when they would bring the animal back to life, the animal would get a brand new, fresh, youthful body. And the animal also got the spiritual benefit of being offered in the yagya. And the Brahmanas are so powerful that they can chant the mantras and bring the animal back to life. In Kali Yuga, we don't have such qualified Brahmanas anymore that they can chant mantras and bring the dead animal back to life. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, any kind of animal killing is completely prohibited. But when Lord Buddha came, the Brahmanas, under the pretext of the Shastra, saying that, oh yes, we can kill animals. So there was widespread killing of the animals at that time, saying that Vedas allow it. So what Lord Buddha did was he wanted to stop this widespread animal killing and sinful activity. So he said, do not follow the Vedas. He said, do not follow the Vedas. Because the circumstances at that time was such. So every incarnation comes with a specific purpose. And Lord Buddha came with this particular purpose of killing the widespread animal, of stopping the widespread animal killing that was going on at that time in the name of the Vedas. So he said, do not follow the Vedas. But therefore, we accept Buddha as a bona fide incarnation. Bhagavatam recognizes that, but we do not follow his instructions. Because the reason why he gave those instructions not following the Vedas, we have to understand the circumstances. Okay. Does that answer your question, Aja?
Yes, Mataji. Yeah.
Okay. Then let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you who appear as Kalki. So Kalki avatar is scheduled to come at the end of Kali Yuga. So we have crossed only 5,000 years of Kali Yuga, but the original duration of Kali Yuga is 432,000 years, 432,000 years, of which we have crossed only 5,000. So when we come to the end of Kali Yuga only, this incarnation Kalki will appear. And what is his mission? To chastise the so-called royal order degraded to the abominable condition of the Malechas, which means our very leaders are so corrupt that they will only destroy the saintly people, and they will be favoring the sinful people. We already know that, already we see how the leaders, the politicians, politics, most of them are corrupted. No, so it has already started in Kali Yuga, but at the end of the Kali Yuga, it will be so intense. There will hardly be very few handful of people who will be following devotional services, and they will be following it in forests incognito, because largely everyone will be sinful. Even the very leaders will be sinful at the end of Kali Yuga. So Kalki will come at the end of Kali Yuga. Okay, Shailesh, you have your hand raised.
What does Mlechas mean?
Malecha means the fallen people, those who do not follow the Shastras. The most rotten, most fallen people are called as the Malechas, those who do not follow the Vedic principles. Okay. My dear Lord, everyone within this material world is conditioned by your illusory energy. Under the impression of false identification and false possession, everyone is transmigrating from one body to another on the path of fruitive activities and their reactions. My dear Lord, I am no exception among these conditioned souls. I am falsely thinking myself happy in possessing my home, wife, children, estate, property, and friends. In this way, I am acting as if in a dreamland, because none of these are permanent. I am a fool to be always absorbed in thoughts of such things, accepting them as permanent truths. My dear Lord, due to my false identification, I have accepted as permanent everything which is non-permanent, such as this material body, which is not spiritual and is the source of all kinds of miserable conditions. Being bewildered by such concepts of life, I am always absorbed in thoughts of duality, and I have forgotten you, who are the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure. I am bereft of your transcendental association, being just like a foolish creature who leaves a watering hole covered by water-nourished vegetation and goes in search of water in the desert. The conditioned souls want to quench their thirst, but they do not know where to find water. They give up the spot where there is actually a reservoir of water and run into the desert where there is no water. My dear Lord, I am completely incapable of controlling my mind, which is now driven by the unbridled senses and is attracted by fruitive activities and their results. Therefore, my intelligence is very miserly. My dear Lord, your lotus feet cannot be appreciated by any person in the conditioned stage of material existence. But somehow or other, I have come near your lotus feet, and I consider this to be your causeless mercy upon me. You can act in any way because you are the supreme controller. I can thus understand that when a person becomes eligible to be delivered from the path of repeated birth and death, it is only by your causeless mercy that he comes nearer to your lotus feet and becomes attached to your devotional service. So see the humility of Akrura, how he is saying that if he can attain any success, it is only because of the causeless mercy of Krishna. And he says how he is materially attached. And he's given this example of how a person leaves a great reservoir of water and goes in search of water in the desert. So yes, Krishna is our well-wisher, and he can give us anything and everything that we want. No, and he can purify us, but we go in search of broken pieces of glass. Akrura fell down before the Lord and said, "My dear Lord, your transcendental eternal form is full of knowledge. Simply by concentrating one's mind upon your form, one can understand in full knowledge everything that be, because you are the original source of all knowledge. You are the supreme powerful, possessing all kinds of energies. You are the supreme Brahman and the supreme person, supreme controller and master of all the material energies. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you because you are Vasudev, the resting place of all creation. You are the all-pervading supreme personality of Godhead, and you are also the supreme soul residing in everyone's heart and giving direction to act. Now, my Lord, I am completely surrendered unto you. Please give me your protection." Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 40th chapter of Krishna, Prayers by Akrura. On that note, by the mercy of Sri Guru and Sri Krishna, we come to the end of today's presentation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Do we have any questions or comments?
So this is the prayers are being offered in the water itself, right?
Right, yes. When he sees Krishna on top of Anantashesha in that form, in the 400 form with all those demigods, that's the time when he offers his prayers. Okay, are we ready for the exam?
Mataji, I have one question.
What's that, Priyanka?
I have one question. It is not related to this class, but just something else. Like I saw the letter by His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So they were clearly mentioned for the initiated devotees that one should not engage himself in the frivolous sports.
One should not engage in the
Frivolous sports.
Frivolous, frivolous.
frivolous sports.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what does he mean by that?
So you
Do
have
we
to see
like
when you read a letter, there are many aspects that you have to consider. The before and after, the context, why is he writing, to whom is he writing? Because when a letter is written, not necessarily that instruction is for everybody. A letter is written, it may be for everybody, but it may also be only for that particular person also. So see what Prabhupada writes in his books is of course the absolute truth because that is Shastra. But when he writes a letter to a particular person, you have to see the context. And what is the context in which so if you take one line from a letter and quote it, it will not be, we cannot comment on it appropriately because we don't know the context, the before and after we don't know. What is it that the person wrote to him? And what is it the Prabhupada replied? So you
actually
send me
it is
the
a
letter, I will try to
Yeah.
see the context and then I will be able to, we'll see what we can understand from that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, Mataji.
See, just as how once Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed his disciple, because this disciple was not able to fast and go, it was an Ekadasi, he was not able to fast and also go on book distribution. So when he told his guru that I cannot go for book distribution because I'm feeling weak due to the fasting. So he told that, okay, in that case, you break your fast and but you go out for book distribution. But that doesn't apply to everybody else because that's what he told only to him, right? So letters also is directed to a particular person. So we need to understand the context. It may be generic also, but it may not necessarily also be generic. So we have to see the context. Okay.
Mataji, you said two Narayanas. One Narayana, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and the one is for Paramatma. Remember, you said this in the class today, just now, like when you were giving the class.
Yeah, there is Mahavishnu, there is Karanodakashai Vishnu and Garbhodakashai Vishnu and Shirodakashai Vishnu, 3 Vishnus.
But you talked about mainly the Garbhodaksha Vishnu and then the Paramatma. In the sentence when we were reading, you said this Narayana goes for Garbhodaksha, right?
Now we have to go back and see which paragraph, because initially Akrura is talking about Garbhodakasha Vishnu, and then he talks about the Paramatma. The first paragraph he is talking about Garbhodakasha Vishnu. The second paragraph he talks about the Super Soul.
Okay, thank you. Hare
And then he also talks about Mahavishnu when he is talking about how he is creating universes. So you have to see in which paragraph he's talking about what.
Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
You're welcome. Okay, so the link to your exam is in your chat.